Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Carla from Rehan Allahwala's World of Connections. And I am here to speak with Danny Levine about his bookstore that has been actually in existence since 1905, over 100 years old. And it's one of the largest Jewish bookstores in the world, or at least in the United States, I believe. I want to remind you that this conversation is supported by the Institute of Peace, which is an online organization promoting peace one conversation at a time. Danny, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Danny Levine. That's how we pronounce it. Some people pronounce it Levine, but we're Levine. And I'm the fourth generation owner of the J. Levine Judaica Company. And I've worked in this business for more than 40 years. And I've seen it go through many stages of development. I came into it right after I graduated from graduate school, and I started working there. And I've been there till in the actual physical store till 2019, last June, when we actually closed the physical store and converted to a virtual store, meaning we have our Amazon store, we have our Facebook page, we have our Torah rental business, and we have a Ketubah City store, which is a pop-up store in Midtown Manhattan today.
Now, I'm going to stop you for a moment. You were telling me about the history of the store and all the grandfathers that were involved. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. Well, we date back our company existence to my great-grandfather, Hirsch Landy, and he was a religious scribe. A scribe is someone who writes Torahs and writes religious Jewish articles. And he lived in Lithuania, and he actually sold Torahs to many illustrious families like the Rothschild. And he was very successful, and he was a very well-known scribe. And what happened was, 1905, began a lot of pogroms, and there was a lot of anti-Semitism. And so a lot of people left Lithuania, and he took his family and emigrated to Manhattan, came through Ellis Island, and lived on the Lower East Side of New York. And there he established a Judaica business selling Torahs and tefillin and other religious articles. And then his son-in-law decided to come into the business. And that son-in-law was my grandfather, Joseph Levine. And he then took the whole business and incorporated it. And he took his three sons into the business, Harold, my father, Seymour, and Melvin. And they made a very successful religious article store. And they had a factory with many women sewing, making Torah curtains, art curtains, and Torah covers, and chuppahs for Jewish wedding, and talesim. And they manufactured all these things, distributed them all over the world, sold a lot to the U.S. Army. And in fact, when World War II came around, they converted a lot of stuff to help the U.S. Army. And interesting, we were on the blacklist from the Arab countries because we were selling Jewish religious articles. But what happened was, in 1963, the city claimed eminent domain on our store that was at 73 Norfolk Street. And they said, you have to leave. And they gave us the money. And so they moved the business a few blocks east to 58 Eldred Street, corner of the famous Hester Street. And there we had a 7-floor store, like a whole department store of Judaica. At that point, we started bringing in a lot of books. We had the largest book collection of Judaica, of Jewish interest, in anywhere in the world. And we had one floor, which is an educational center, selling textbooks to Hebrew schools and Jewish schools all over the country. And we were supplying other stores and selling them wholesale, all the books and the Judaica and the Talesim and the religious articles. And we had people like Isaac Bashevis Singer, the famous Yiddish writer, came to the store, and we had an autographing signing party with his book. And we had a lot of exciting people visiting us from all over the world. And it was very. When I came into the store. I came into the store in 1979 after I finished graduate school, and I came into the store, which had so much merchandise, but it was not presented in an aesthetic fashion. So I went and I convinced my uncles and my father we should renovate the store. We made it to a beautiful store with a spiral staircase going up to the second floor. And we displayed the books beautifully and the giftware beautifully, the mezuzahs, the menorahs, the Seder plates, the Kiddush cups. Everything was on display beautifully. And it was very successful. And then what happened was in 1986, a Chinese man came into my store and said, "What's a Jewish store doing in the middle of Chinatown?" We'd been in the Lower East Side since 1905, but by 1963, the wave from China, so many millions of people came, and they all came to the Lower East Side, and slowly the whole Lower East Side became part of Chinatown. So I decided it was time to move. And so I took the store and we moved it to Midtown Manhattan, 5 West 30th Street. And we started on the second floor, and then 2 years later, we expanded to the first floor. We had 2 floors. And I made the most beautiful Judaica shop in the world. It was marble floors and blue neon. And I had these stuffed dolls, life-size, in the window, acting out each holiday. And it was just, and we're right off Fifth Avenue, between Broadway and Fifth Avenue. And so we would get tourists from all over the world would come to the store. And anybody who was getting married, we had the largest ketubah center where people could pick out a marriage ketubah for their Jewish wedding. And people, every bar mitzvah came to buy the talis for the bar mitzvah, or the beautiful pink talis with lace and sequins and diamonds and jewels for the bas mitzvah girl. And then everybody who had a new home had to come buy a mezuzah for their Jewish home. And then Passover time, people came to buy their Seder plate. And Hanukkah time, people came to buy their dreidels and their menorahs. And during Rosh Hashanah time, which is now, they came to buy the shofar, and they try to blow it all the time. They try it out. And this is before COVID. So people used to blow the shofar in the store, trying out to see which one sounded the best. And so we had just like so much excitement. And the best part about my business is I had staff. I had Rabbi Castell work for us for 49 years. And he moved from Lower East Side to Midtown, was the manager there until he retired. And then I had my assistant bookkeeper. Her name was Celia, and she worked for us for almost 40 years. And then I had my salesperson, Debbie Deere. She came and she worked for, I think, 38 years. And these people worked for me. And then I had Gideon, who was in the shipping department and ran the Ketubah Center, and he stayed for 27 years. So everybody just became like a family to me. And then my son came into the business. His name is Sean. And he came in after he's graduated from University of Maryland, and he helped me, develop a website, and he helped me also organize the store in a different way. And he worked with me for 8 years until it was decided that he was going to move back to Florida, where his wife came from. And so he went to work for Adidas in Florida and worked with his father-in-law. And I was left, he helped me online a lot. But in terms of the store, I ran it myself with Debbie and Celia and Gideon, and we just did an amazing job. And people came from all over the world and remarked what a beautiful store and how we had the best customer service. You go to Yelp, and we had the highest rating of any Judaica store. And then we started selling on Amazon. And on Amazon, we've maintained 100% feedback. Now, people usually, when they go to Amazon, problem, they'll go and write a bad review because they're angry and they complain. But it's hard to get people to come to Amazon and leave feedback saying how wonderful the customer service is, how quickly they got their orders, how perfectly it was packed, how nice like we do it. And so I've kept this Amazon store, and I've kept my 100% feedback on Amazon. And now that I have no physical store, I have a mini storage where I have all my Amazon inventory, so I can ship out all my orders the same day I get them, and I rush them out. And I keep my 100% feedback on Amazon. And we also have a Torah rental business where we rent Torahs to bar and bat mitzvah families who are having a bar mitzvah, and they don't want to be in a synagogue. They want to be in a hotel, or they want to be in a gymnasium, and they can have a bar bat mitzvah by having a real Torah. And then now, of course, with the COVID virus, everybody's having Zoom bar mitzvahs. They're having it in their house, and they make the bar mitzvah, the bas mitzvah, and I supply the Torah to make it a real bar mitzvah.
How many bar and bat mitzvahs do you do a week?
Okay, so I average about 4 a week, and it gets really crazy. In the middle of the virus, it was very quiet because people were just canceling everything and they weren't doing it. But now it's really picking up, and I'll have 2, 3, 4 rentals a week, and either they pick it up here at my warehouse on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, or else I deliver it in the tri-state area. So that's exciting. And then the last thing that I do really that's exciting is my ketubah store. We call it Ketubah City. So in the store we had the most beautiful ketubah selection, and that was one of the saddest things. That I was closing my store. What was I going to do with my ketubahs? I had over 200 samples of ketubahs alone, and so I had this framer who worked nearby to me, and we became very good friends. His name is Jacob, and he has a framing store called Decor Art on 31st Street and 3rd Avenue. He said, Danny, why don't you bring all your ketubahs to my store, and you could sell your ketubahs in my store? So I said, Jacob, that is so wonderful. And Jacob is a Muslim, and I'm Jewish. And he says, but we're the sons of Abraham. We are brothers. And so we've worked together.
I love that.
Way. And I make up anytime somebody wants to get married, they want a ketubah, they email me or they call me, and I make an appointment, and I meet them there at the Ketubah City store. We call it Ketubah City, which is really cool because we have so many ketubahs there. It's like a whole city of ketubahs. And these are ketubahs from all over the world. We have paper cuts, and we have watercolors, and we have small ones, large ones, flowers, designs, unbelievable, hundreds of ketubahs to select from. And so my life is very busy and then what I also did is I kept my phone, my Danny Levine phone number that I had for the last 33 years. I switched it to a cell phone. And so I had this cell phone, which is just for business. And now people call my store thinking my store is still open, this big store. And I answer Jay Levine, and they say, oh, what time are you open till today? I said, well, I'm open here till 5 o'clock, but I have no more store. But what do you need? And I'll send it to you. So it's like modern technology. And I'm able to keep the business running without a store, without employees, without rent, and it's just been wonderful. And especially since the pandemic came, and then the violence in New York, where they were smashing windows and smashing storefronts, I was so blessed that God ordained that I should close the store just in time to avoid all those problems.
And that's great. Because you may have gotten a lot of problems because of your Jewish store.
Right. So I feel very blessed.
Now, you were telling me that you are a modern Orthodox Jew. Can you explain that to
you have people who are Jewish and they do nothing. They're like unaffiliated and they're not religious. And that's fine, because if you're Jewish, you're Jewish. But then there is, Orthodox Judaism, Conservative Judaism, and Reform Judaism. So the original religion is the Orthodox Judaism. That's the traditional Jewish. And what does Orthodox mean? Orthodox mean, for example, we keep the Sabbath. Every Friday night, from Friday night to Saturday night, we don't do any electricity. We don't turn on lights. We have to use a Shabbos clock with a timer to turn on the lights. We don't cook on the Sabbath. We have a hot plate where we would keep food warm, and we go to synagogue, especially on the Sabbath. And basically, what it is, and there's no cell phone on the Sabbath. And so, for one day out of the week, we have a rest. And you don't know what that is like when you're raising children. I have, thank God, 5 children. And as they were growing up, every Friday night, we had beautiful Shabbat meal that my wife cooked. And my kids were all around the table, and we had a chance to talk and share our ideas and give over our values. Now, think about someone who doesn't have that Sabbath. 7 days a week, everybody's going to the movies, going to the bowling alley, on their phones 24/7. They never have time to take a breath and to experience what feelings are and what communication was like all the time. And so for us, the Shabbat gave us this chance for us to bond with our children and to be there and to raise, 5 modern Orthodox Orthodox Jews. Well, one of my daughters became very religious. She moved to Israel. So then that's orthodoxy, okay? But I'm modern Orthodox, and I was explaining to you, to Carla, that modern Orthodox means that I'm not afraid to mingle with the outside world. I'm not trying to close myself off in a Jewish community. I'm not trying to be different from everybody else. I want to be in the world, and I want to show people what a Jew can be like. And people could learn from me, and I could learn from them. Now, to the right of me are the Hasidic or the black hat Jews, people who have beards, and they'll wear certain garments that they wore in Europe, and they're more fervent. But in terms of ritual and mitzvot and commandments, I put on during the week. I put on tefillin in every morning. That's the phylacteries that are wrapped on the arm and put on the head. We keep kosher. We don't mix milk and meat. We only eat kosher animals, which are slaughtered by a kosher slaughterer. And then there are a lot of other, there are 613 commandments. There are a lot of different rules in Judaism, and we keep them all. And the only difference is that I don't look like you wouldn't, except for the yarmulke that I wear on my head, you wouldn't necessarily know that I'm a Jew. And so then you had the Reform Jews. The Reform Jews basically felt, and there was also Reconstructionist Jews. Reform Jews felt, that was the old country. Let's move Sabbath to Sunday. Let's not have a prayer shawl. We don't need all these things. We don't have to keep kosher anymore. But now, over the years, they realized that by doing that, if you don't have something physically to do, it's very hard to pass on the tradition to the next generation. And they had so much intermarriage and so much leaving the faith that they started to wear yarmulkes. They brought back the talis. They, kept the Sabbath, the services on the Sabbath, and then. But then what happened was one time they were having the graduation from the rabbinical school of the Reforms Jews, and they served pork and shellfish at the dinner. And so a few people got up and they said, "You know what? This is terrible." And they founded conservative Judaism. Conservative Judaism is more traditional, so it's a mix between Orthodox and Reform. So there they have a lot more egalitarianism, and one problem with what they did in the conservative movement is they passed a law that you could drive to synagogue. And that's the whole thing. They don't believe necessarily that all the Torah is exactly from God directly, but that the rabbis can interpret it today. And they decided that you could drive to synagogue. The problem is, once you could drive to synagogue, you could also drive to the movies, you could drive to the bowling alley, and they lost their children. The children weren't at home on the Sabbath. And so that was a big, big problem with the conservative movement, and they started to dwindle. And what happened is the children would either become Reform and intermarry, or they'd become Orthodox and have observance, and the conservative movement started to lose a lot of its power. It used to be the biggest movement. And then there's also Reconstructionist movement. Reconstructionism is supernaturalism, religion without supernaturalism. They don't believe in miracles. They don't believe that the Red Sea split. They don't believe that the burning bush burnt. They don't believe that there were actual miracles. They think it's all an allegory. Whereas we believe everything in the Torah is accurate and is meant to be believed true. So that's.
I grew up as a conservative Jew, and our synagogue, because my parents originally were in Northeast Philadelphia, and when I was 2, they moved to the suburbs. I remember driving with my father, especially on the high holidays, to go to synagogue, to be there for Shabbat. It's totally different. Now, what do you this is probably a controversial question, but what do you think of the less orthodox areas of Judaism?
Could you repeat the question? What was the what?
what are your feelings about the less Orthodox areas of Judaism? Like my rabbi, and I would say the synagogue that I belong to or I'm affiliated with more than belong to is is very non-traditional in many ways, but also traditional. I mean, my rabbi has his guitar for everything, except on the high holidays. Of course, he only has it at the end of Yom Kippur.
Right.
So I can
I'll tell you my feelings. My feelings is I love everybody. Okay, I respect everybody. I respect any kind of Jew. I respect any kind of non-Jew. I respect a Muslim. I respect African Americans. I respect the Asian community. I respect everybody. I love everybody. I have no right on my part to judge anybody else in terms of the different aspects of Judaism. You know, who knows what God wants? Maybe you know you're right. Maybe they're right. I have no right to tell anybody else how to practice. And I practice what I believe and what I was taught, and I taught that to my children. But anybody else that wants to celebrate Judaism in another way, all the power to them. In our store, we always carried all the Reformed prayer books, all the conservative prayer books, all the Orthodox prayer books. So we always were very open-minded and open and accepting to everybody.
And that's good to hear. Now, I was aware that the Hasidism kind of stick together and the Orthodox stick together. Is there any, and you're modern Orthodox, is there any way that we can help them begin to realize if they spoke to each other, they may see that there isn't that much of a difference?
Are you talking about who and who? Who talked to who? The Orthodox to the Reform and the Conservative, or the Orthodox to the Hasidic, or the Hasidic? Which one?
No, all of them. But I guess mainly the Orthodox and the Hasidic, the people who are very much into Kabbalah. If people would only talk and learn from each other, what do you think would happen in Judaism?
Well, I think
I love what you're saying.
Some don't have my feeling, and they want to keep separate, and they'll look at anybody who's a drop to the left of them as they're not even Jewish. You know, they're not kosher, they're not good, and they'll, you know, some people will judge other people, and you know that's the antithesis to my beliefs of life. But there are people that, you know, they don't want to talk to the other sides. They'll look at other people and say, you know, they're not doing it right. But I say I always have dialogue with conservative and the Reform and Reconstructionists and the interfaith and the non-Jews and everybody, and I'm always happy to have a conversation with anybody and talk about ideas and values and spirituality. Yeah.
So this is just something I just feel strongly about, that we need to open the minds, because the more closed we are, that's what creates the wars and the tension. How do you think we can make it a little more peaceful and less warlike?
Right. Well, I always tell people God taught us an interesting lesson. Who were the first brothers in history? Cain and Abel, and one killed the other one. So the message from God is that, you know, even brothers you could have, you know, hatred for, and that's the lesson for us all. That here we're talking about Jewish brothers and sisters, and why can't they get along, and you know, why is it so difficult? But I think there's always hope, and if one person starts, you never know what they can accomplish.
Okay, so how can we get that started?
You want to change the world right here at this show, right? Right now?
We can't change the world that quickly, but I think we need to begin speaking about it and begin letting people know. I mean, we have people from Vietnam here, people from this country, people from Pakistan, which is really cool. Why don't we throw out some ideas of what can be done?
Well, I'll tell you that Judaism and being Jewish, we are always supposed to be a light unto the nations. We're supposed to set an example of a high spirituality, of an ethical life, and leading a good life. And we try to have good influence. I mean, you see like how Israel goes, and they when someone's an earthquake anywhere in the world, they'll go and they'll help. They'll send their medical teams out to help. And the scientific discoveries they're always trying to share. And so Judaism is meant to be, we were the original religion. The first monotheistic religion was Judaism. And then came Islam and Christianity. But Judaism was the first religion. And I feel that we can make more overtures to the other religions and to other people, and try to get along better.
Do you think religion is like the banana peel and spirituality lies under it and allows people to grow?
I mean, some of the biggest wars were fought over religion, right? I mean, even in the Muslim countries, they fight. The Shiites and the Sunnis, they're fighting, and they're all Muslim countries, and they're fighting. And it's if you become very fanatical and you can't see another point of view, that's where the danger comes. The most strictest, unenlightened part of any religion is very dangerous. Extremes is a problem, because then you feel like you are the only way that it can be, and then that's where the arguments come in. But if someone like myself that's more modern and open-minded, hopefully we can make changes in the world.
And hopefully we will. I loved it when you mentioned that Jews are actually very open-minded. But the problem is they don't practice it, which is the problem all around the world.
Right. Yeah, it's, life is a journey. That's what I feel. And that, we meet people, we share ideas, and we're only on this planet for a limited amount of time. And we have to try to do the best that we can, and try to create the best will, and do the most, and create the most, and be the best we can be.
And that's all we can do, which is the reality left in life. Do you have any words of wisdom you'd like to offer to people?
Well, I'll tell you, my son asked me, would it have been better if we could have lived forever? What if Adam and Eve hadn't taken that apple from the tree, and at that time we were going to live forever? And so would it be better if we could live forever? And I said, no. The beauty of the fact that we know that our time is a maximum, maybe 120 years, we say in Judaism that you could live till 120. So now that we know that our time is limited, we get up in the morning and we know we want to accomplish as much as we can, because we never know when our last day is. And so you always want to create, you always want to do, you always want to accomplish as much as you can, because life is short. And the fact that we don't live forever, I think, is very positive to make our lives the most productive that we can be. I mean, thank God I have 4 of my children are married, and I have grandchildren. So I see my life being, continuing on through my children and my grandchildren. So that's a very gratifying thing for myself and for my wife. And so I feel very blessed.
You have a great smile.
Thank you.
I really want to thank you. Your energy, just everything, just actually uplifted me tonight because I've been doing this all day and I was ready to stop. And just you yourself were quite a blessing to speak to tonight.
Carla, thank you very much for inviting me on the show, and I'm glad you found out about my Judaica company, Danny Levine, and I'm glad I got a chance to try to share some of my ideas of what I want this world to be.
Do you have any other ideas you want to share?
I mean, I hope eventually in the next few years to move to Israel, because I think that would make my life be very more meaningful, to live in a Jewish country, a Jewish homeland, and help build it. And one of my children lives there already, so that's one of my ideas. Though my other children live here, so we'll still keep coming back to America for a few part of the year. But that's my dream, to move to Israel, and it's called Aliyah, which is going up.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you one thing that I thought about when I was very young. I said there are plenty of good people who don't need religion, and there are plenty of bad people whom religion doesn't help. Because in a sense, all the mitzvahs and the commandments that God gave us are supposed to make us into better people, and teach us, about giving tzedakah, helping the poor, learning, growing, and so I love the Jewish religion, and I'm very proud to be a Jewish person, and but I look at the Muslims who are proud to be Muslims, and I respect them, and the Christians who are happy to be Christians. That's wonderful. It's a matter of and one of the things that I just want to share in the end is that the commandments that I talked about a lot about between man and God, but just as important is the relationships between man and man and women, and that you have to be ethical with your fellow man, and you have to be kind to your fellow person. You can't be very religious and keep all these commandments and then be dishonest and mean and cruel, because I feel it's just as important, as it's called bein adam l'chaveiro, between man and man, as it is between bein adam l'makom, between man and God, and they're just as important.
And I want to say that in the over 3 years I've known Rehan, his big thing is, I want to be a better person. And I hear him say that all the time. And then I look at what he's doing, and he is a good person, but he realizes, I want to be better. I want to be better. And I feel like saying, but Rehan, how can you be better? You're already a good person, just like you are already a good person. Danny Levine.
Always room for improvement, though. Always trying to get better.
True. We can always get better.
Right.
I want to really thank you. This was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I am happy we did this tonight.
And I thank you, Carla. It was really my honor to be here on your show. And you're doing an important job trying to make peace in the earth. Big job ahead of you, because we're not there yet.
But I believe we will get there.
I do too.
I believe everything that's happening in the world now are things that are bringing us to that point.
That's great.
You obviously agree.
Oh, yeah.
And with that, I am going to also thank those who have been watching, including Rehan, who was excited to see you live. Thank you, everyone. And we are going to sign off. Remember, this show is sponsored by the Institute of Peace, which is an online organization creating peace one conversation at a time. Let's wave goodbye.
Shalom.
Bye. Shalom.
Peace.
And Lashana Tova.
Happy Jewish New Year. Thank you.
Okay.